القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ثم جعلناك على شريعة من الأمر فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون إنهم لن يغنوا عنك من الله شيئا وإن الظالمين بعضهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين. هذا بصائر للناس وهدى ورحمة لقوم يوقنون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our fifth night in our series looking at Islam in Britain and Britain in Islam, the forthcoming decade of 2020 to 2030. In our first night we asked, to what extent is Islam a source of good and change within Britain? Our second night we reflected on how the Holy Prophet of Islam himself pondered upon his own community. In the third night we were asking ourselves, what are the challenges and opportunities for the Muslim community in a post-Brexit world? Our fourth night, last night, we began to ask ourselves, what is the biggest challenge that the Muslim community faces, or where is the place that the Muslim community most has to prioritize itself in terms of its relationship to the British society? And we stated that, of course, Islam has come for us to become muwahhideen, of those who have oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our heart. And when you see a community that removes God from itself, this brings about multiple challenges in the way in which they even understand the rank of the human soul, or the way in which they engage with each other, or the way in which they understand various other principles that they have in society. So many places in the world have taken God away from them, and so as we see this development of a new neo-atheistic society and a neoliberal society and an ultra-secularist society, it becomes upon us as the Muslim community to help reinstitutionalize God into the fabric of this society, lest when God is removed from society, what that society may become like. Now, homework. Who remembers the homework from yesterday? Hands up. No one remembers the homework? Ahsan, someone is awake. It was a trick question. Well done to you. There was no homework yesterday. And the reason for that is because the discussion yesterday is very much linked to the discussion of tonight and allows us to be able to look at the other side of the coin of the discussion that we started from yesterday. If, of course, the greatest responsibility that the Muslim community has to the British society is to ensure godhood, godliness into that society, the other side of the coin means that from within us, that the challenge comes that as we begin to lose God centricity in our own selves, as we begin to lose godness in our own community, we need to also protect ourselves from that particular challenge of godliness and God consciousness in our own communities being ripped from us. In the forthcoming decade, there will be a particular challenge that is going to come here, if it is not already, and is being funded and pushed, particularly from the United States of America. It is being funded and pushed here, and will be a severe challenge at the forefront of the Muslim community, and that is what is known as the ex-Muslim identity. Many of you will have heard of this. Many of you will have seen it being bandied about. What do we mean by ex-Muslim identity?
People that used to be Muslim either transferred to atheist, secular or liberal.
MashaAllah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You definitely deserve an A star, a gold star for that. Well done. It's exactly as my young brother mentioned. The ex-Muslim identity are those individuals that are claiming to have left the religion for whatever reason. And they are being championed, and the agenda is being pushed onto the Muslim community such that in a number of different ways and attacks on the Muslim community is coming such that people leave Islam in droves, or at least that is their hope and their plan. So as much as we need to think about uplifting God in community, wider society, we also need to think about the protection of our own selves, because for certain to face a new attack coming to us in the forthcoming decade. Why do I say that? I say that because of one, the trends that are starting, which we will show you in a few minutes. I have a little presentation to show you. Sayyid has kindly prepared it for us. And also, when we speak to certain Muslim and specifically Shi'i individuals who have very close ties to government, very close ties to establishment, they themselves have told us the next wave of attack upon the Muslim community will specifically be the ex-Muslim agenda, and to try to bring people out of Islam and move them towards a very ultimate secular, ultra-secular or atheistic position. And therefore we need to be able to talk about this issue and how you and I are going to secure our own faith in the next 10 years and ensure the next generation's faith as well in the next 10 years. Now, on a previous night, I had shown you a book, and if you remember, on one of the nights we talked about that in the liberal movement, they want to make Islam have certain antonyms. Do you remember I asked, what is an antonym? It's the word which means it's opposite, right? So if you recall, we went through a list of words, right? Islam has certain synonyms in the liberal world. Islam is synonymous in their world with things like being intolerant. And therefore its antonym, its opposite is the West, which is tolerant. Islam, for example, doesn't provide rights. The West is its antonym. It provides rights, and so on and so forth. We went through that list. Now this book is truly one of the most interesting books I have ever read, and I mention it again to you. It's called Islam in Liberalism, meaning how the liberal movement has or is trying to change Islam, the attacks from within and from without. And this author, a skilled author by the name of Joseph Masad, he has gone through the history of liberalism and how liberalism is trying to change Islam from within. I just want to be able to start by reading a particular passage from this book, and then inshallah go into this topic of the ex-Muslim identity and some of the challenges around it. He says the following: the liberal mission is to have the Islamic tradition remade in the image of liberal Protestant Christianity. Muslim resistance to this benevolent mission is represented as a rejection of modernity and the liberal values of freedom, liberty, equality, the right-bearing individual, democratic citizenship, women's rights, sexual rights, freedom of belief, secularism, and rationality. Islam is opposed to all of those things, apparently. It is seen as a rejection of modernity, and modernity includes all of those things. In short, as a pathology and a form of neurosis that must not only be vanquished, Islam, not only must be vanquished, but also, and as we will see, psychoanalyzed. Thus, if Muslims refuse to convert willingly to liberalism, or at least to forms of Islam that liberalism finds tolerable, they must be forced to convert using military power, as their resistance threatens the core value of liberalism, namely its universality and the necessity of its universalization as globalization. So liberalism has to change all Muslims. And if they are going to willingly do this, then they have to conform to either liberalism or a type of Islam that is tolerant or tolerable by liberalism. We're often called the moderate Muslims, right? Which we'll come to in a few minutes. Talal Asad understands this project thus, saying, if the European Enlightenment secular redemptive politics condemns religious forms of violence, pain, and suffering as non-emancipatory of sinners, there is a readiness on its part to cause pain to those who are to be saved by being humanized. We're ready to hurt you if it means in the long run we get to humanize you, which means at the moment you are not humanized. You don't have the privilege of being considered to be humanized. As I said, this is not an ordinary book. This is considered to be one of the most important books written in our present era. Now, we have certain challenges in our community, both in terms of the wider liberal movement and secular movement, and also the way in which that impacts the Muslim mindset and how that ultimately manifests itself in belief and practice. Yesterday, we started talking about secularism. Do you remember what we said about the definitions of secularism? We said the definition of secularism from the Latin means the here and now. It believes in what is present here and now, and what the people think is morally correct, that is the standard of what your morality should be. So if yesterday we believed something was immoral, but tomorrow we believe it to be moral, just by virtue of that change within society, that's your standard of morality. Also, that which can only be perceived through the senses. So therefore, if something can be proved to you by science, it is true. But if it cannot be proved by science, it cannot be true. Now, other elements of secularism are also important to understand. And one or two need to be mentioned as we go into this. The first thing is that secularism believes in making different spaces for different things. In this room, in this hall, you can be as religious as you like. In your home, you can be as religious as you like. But don't bring God and religiosity into the public square. There's a space to be religious, and then there's a space not to be religious. As you know, in the ultra-secularist country of France, fine, if you want to wear a cross, or if you want to wear the hijab, you can do so, but you can do so at home, or you can do so in the mosque. But if there's a public institution, you shouldn't wear it. And if the public institution is actually run, or the public space is run by the public institution, then you are prohibited. So for example, in school, because this is paid for by the public, therefore you cannot wear that which is your private garment in the public space. Now, if we understand that this is a challenge of secularism, we also have to understand the outcome of this as well. Imagine now, you and I were to be very different people in different spaces. If I talk to you one way and behave with you one way here, but then I was to behave with you at another way at the restaurant, what would you say about me? He's a hypocrite, right? If here I'm talking to you nicely, quoting to you ayat, ahadith, fiqh, But then you and I go out and you see that I'm swearing and I'm bullying and I'm looking at all things perverse. What will you say about me? You'll say that there's two different Jaffers, right? Now imagine when there's two different spaces for the whole of society to work within. One which is very, very small for you to be able to appreciate your God and that morality that comes from it. And then the rest of society, you cannot bring God into that society, into that space in society. You have two different worlds living side by side. It creates a hypocrisy within you. The outcome of that is that when you grow up as a child, as a person, you don't know where you sit properly as a human being. You will act differently in different spaces. One of the ulama was telling a story, and I believe that this is a true story he was saying. Like it wasn't a joke, he said this like it happened. He goes, he's telling about himself. He goes, I have a particular problem and I admit it. He says, when I drive, I often break the speed limit. So for example, I'm running late, the speed limit is, 70. From time to time, I will end up going 80, 85. And he said, look, the time I make sure I don't go 80, 85 is either when there's a speed camera or when I see a police car ahead of me. You slow down to be able to make sure that you're not caught by the camera or by the police car. He said, firstly, isn't that hypocrisy? So I'm willing to break the law, willing to put other people at risk from my dangerous driving. But the moment I see authority, then I think to myself, oh no, I might get 3 points. Right? That's hypocrisy, isn't it? Now, he said what was interesting. He said, I have a friend of mine, I was in the car with him, and everyone was doing 85. Ahead of us was a police car. Everyone started slowing down to 60 as you might normally do, but my driver carried on at 85. Went past the police car, and of course the police car pulled him over. He's a bit like, what's going on here? Police driver said, what are you doing driving at 85? You saw me. Everyone is like driving at 60. Why did you not slow down with everyone else? The driver said, I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I'll take the points, but I didn't want to be a hypocrite. Interesting, isn't it? Like I said, I don't know if he was being sincere in that story, but he mentioned this story. So now, just think about what happens to the mind, to the heart, to the soul, when we grow up with these different spaces. This is particularly the challenge that we have in our time now. When we think about modesty and the modesty that Islam brings with its dress code for both men and women, it is so shocking, isn't it? If you and I go to Next and we start trying on clothes inside the cubicle, it's a private space, isn't it? Right? But sometimes people are willing to go outside on the beach and wear exactly the same clothes that they would be in that private space. If they were to pull back the curtain in the changing room, they would suddenly be shocked. Why are you looking at me in my undergarments? But they're willing to wear exactly the same clothes on the beach, and for there it is not a problem. Why is there a different space? Why is it that the same clothes are moral here but immoral there? Why are the same clothes problematic there and you can see that there's a hypocrisy in which we structure our society. When you take that to its nth degree in all elements of the way in which we treat each other, the way in which we understand good and evil, the human being becomes very confused as to the way in which they are supposed to act. Just today, I don't know how many of you watched the Prime Minister's questions, yeah? The leader of the opposition, he asked 5-6 questions, and each and every one of them were not answered. Not one of them were answered. You know, one of them he asked twice. He said, there are enough reports to say that when we leave without a deal, if and when we leave without a deal, the price of food will go up and availability of food will go down. Right? So now we know, we've spoken about this a few times, that there are 3.7 million children in food poverty. Right? And we mentioned a few times that there are certain reports from charities that because they can't find enough to be able to eat during lunchtimes or school holidays, children are going hungry. Reports tell us children are actually stealing lunch at lunchtime outside their schools in order to be able to feed themselves. This is what's happening in the country and more. So he asks, and he says to the Prime Minister, elected by 0.1% of this country, he asks the Prime Minister, well, because of these reports, and you have certain documentation telling us how bad it's going to be, the preparation for a no-deal Brexit, can you publish this and tell us which type of foods are going to become more expensive? Which type of foods are going to be unavailable for 6-8 weeks? Which type of foods will go bad because they're going to be checked at ports now, where previously they didn't have to be checked because they were within the EU, and so they're going to go bad? Can you give us some clue so parents, so families can prepare for this? There's already food shortage and hunger. Can you help us prepare for this? Now, when you remove God and you just put everything on a political scale without understanding how to be able to understand the reality of good and evil, then all of this just becomes politicized. The PM doesn't think about the needs of the society and people who are already going hungry. His answer is a political response. Well, why are you doing this? Why haven't you done that? That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying I'm concerned for society. At least show the equal level of concern for society and let us know what's going to happen to those people who already struggle to make ends meet. How much their weekly shop, their monthly shop is going to increase by. This is what happens. And we have to understand that these are consequences, and that when our children grow up into this type of space, they also become very confused about these matters, the way in which they understand politics, the way in which they understand morality, the way in which they understand these different spaces that are being created for them. This is a challenge. But the Muslim community is going through specific challenges to it, as we just read, that there is a specific attack on Islam and on Muslims to drag them out of their Islam, so that they convert out of it, or they become ultra-secular or ultra-liberal Muslims. And the plan will not stop until Muslims are of that way of thinking. Now, the challenges specifically to the Muslims are also interesting. Internally here, and you could get a flavor of this from the kinds of Q&As that we have, we're actually moving into a very post-traditionalist community as well. What do we mean by that? Post-traditionalism means that the way in which we used to consider our normative practices, our normative traditions, even our own youth are leaving those. And as a result of that, they're looking for questions and answers that previously our own parents would never have thought of. It means the way in which our youth understand and subscribe or don't subscribe to traditional ideas of authority are also changing. Take this as an example, or one or two examples to understand what I mean, and you'll be able to think through it. The way in which we conceive of the Azadari of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. When I grew up, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just giving you an understanding. When I grew up, there was no such thing as standing outside during Ma'tam. Right? There was no such thing as sitting outside during Majlis. You sat next to your father, and there was some wiggle room because you might ask, can I go to the toilet to get out of Majlis for a few minutes? Yeah? But you were expected to come back immediately. There was no two ways about it. How are we understanding Azar today? Rightly or wrong, I'm not arguing the rights and the wrongs. For example, the way people want to express their Husseiniism is becoming less with the traditional form, and people are, for example, expressing their Husseiniism through humanitarian causes. Sometimes youth will say, well, I don't understand the Ma'tam, or I don't understand the language that's being used, or I don't connect in the same way. I would rather go out and feed the homeless in the name of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, mathalan, for example. Yeah? So the way in which we have our whole traditional system is changing over a period of time. This is what's meant by a post-traditionalist community. We are moving away from traditional authority structures. We are moving away from traditional habits and practices. One of the Maraji', Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi, was talking about this in one of his discussions. He said the following. He said, the majority of Maraji', may Allah bless them all, when they write their Risala Amaliyah, yes, their book of laws, they don't write with it their evidences, the proofs, the istidlal. He said, the reason why I've written even a basic istidlal, the verses, the ahadith, some of the principles, how we navigate, and then published it with my Risala, is specifically for the Western audience. You know why? Because the youth of the West, they never are satisfied with just an answer. They want to know why it is this way. It's not wrong. He didn't say it's wrong or right. He's saying that's the circumstance, that's the waqi', that's the reality of what's happening on the ground. The youth want to know why this is the case. So I published my Risala Amaliyah with the istidlal, with the evidences and proofs of my fatawa in aqaid, and also in ahkam, and in ethics as well, so that you're able to know for yourself where we get the proofs from. So understanding that we're moving, our challenges are going forward, we also need to be able to respond to those challenges. Otherwise, people do get disenfranchised from the religion if the religion cannot provide them with sufficient answers. Now, because we are seeing this, we have to understand that the Muslim community has the challenges from externally and from within as well. And when these are not provided, people end up leaving the religion because of the amount of pressures that are upon them. There is the secular movement, there is the atheist movement, there is the liberal movement, there is the post-traditionalist movement, and then we also come to the Islamophobic movement as well. We've never faced the number or the types of challenges that we are facing. The Islamophobia industry, I say it's an industry because many hundreds of millions of dollars go into it. Sometimes they will fund every willy-nilly person. The moment you convert out of Islam, you're given a book deal. Yeah, you get to go on every radio station, all the different TV stations, or the moment you become a pseudo-reformist. Should I mention the name? The moment you become a Muhammad Tawhidi, an embarrassment to the faith, and present yourself as someone who can just pretend to be a reformist, when you've literally got nothing behind you, no books of any repute, no articles, no studies of any repute whatsoever, to be called an Imam of peace when you don't have any example of the peace that you created on the earth, and then to present yourself as a reformist, of course the Western media are going to take him as their darling. Anytime anyone sells out from anything they believe in, they get presented as the darling for some group or the other. Now, because there is an Islamophobia industry, people are being pushed to be able to be the representatives of this Islamophobia industry. Now, this is important. Certain statistics and anecdotal evidence for you to wrap your head around to understand the extent of the challenges that are being faced on our community. Maybe we don't know about it. Maybe we haven't reflected on it enough. It needs to be brought to the fore of our attention. As an example, there is a study from the Yaqeen Institute. The Yaqeen Institute were putting certain surveys together for the Muslim community to understand Islamophobia. And if anyone wants these, anyone needs the references, I've got them, my laptop is there, we can go through them after. As an example, the Yaqeen Institute found that only, listen to this, only 1 out of every 3 Muslim children were willing to admit that they were Muslim. Do you understand? 2 out of 3 young Muslims don't feel confident enough to be able to say in public, in school, I am Muslim, because of the extent of the pressures that are upon them. After Boris Johnson's comments about those who wear the niqab as being looking like bank robbers or letterboxes, Islamophobic attacks went up in this country by 375%. Do you not think that's going to have an impact on the psyche of your children? The confidence of your children? We have to realize what's going on in front of us. We have to join the dots. And therefore the madrasa system has to respond. The pulpit has to respond. Parents have to respond. Sit down and talk to your children when they come back from school. What was happening? How did you find it? What's happening on the ground, and understand it. I'll give you some anecdotal evidence. This is the extent of what's happening on the ground. I'm a madrasa teacher. I have to deal with 1,500 children. I see every week and what they talk about, how they express themselves. I've seen children in our own madrasas. They will be bantering with one another, yeah? And you know, sometimes kids, they play around with each other. You know, you got your phone in the hand, you kind of knock it out of the hand. So, you know, I've seen this, they're playing. And as they're arguing with each other, you know what they call each other? Terrorist. They'll knock the phone out of their hands, play, shut up, you terrorist. Now that means it's being imbibed, isn't it? The Islamophobia is being taken in, and then it's actually being regurgitated back on fellow Muslims. Kids have told me in madrasa what's happening in, this is London, so this is cosmopolitan. This isn't, you know, out in the sticks somewhere. This is what's happening everywhere. Ask your children if they've had these experiences. Children come to me from the madrasa, you know what they say? They say, as an example, when we come to school with our backpack, we're asked, is there a bomb in there? When they are discussing religious education in the school, and for example, you know, they'll talk about adhan or something like that, and takbir, Allahu Akbar is mentioned, someone from sitting behind them in class will go, kaboom, pretending like Allahu Akbar is essentially related to suicide bombings. Now, if you're a youngster, if you're a child, male and female, the sisters who are emblematic of our faith through the hijab that they wear, so they're easily more spottable, and all of these attacks are going up, you understand, with all of these different pressures that are upon the young Muslim community, many people are actually departing from this faith because they don't feel it protects them, or that it doesn't provide them the answers that they're looking for, or the way in which they're inheriting it is so culturalized and backwards that it's not a faith that they can actually use for goodness and productiveness in their own lives. The atheist movement, the neoliberal movement, the secular movement, the post-traditionalist movement, and the Islamophobic movement is all coming together at once and picking off and targeting our youth, whereby they are spending many, many millions of dollars and pounds to be able to take your children away from this faith. I want to show you a couple of slides, inshallah, just to be able to picturize this and to be able to appreciate some of these things that are happening in front of our eyes. And this is what's going on at the moment, this week, this month, to be able to demonstrate to you some of the challenges that we have. So the first slide, I just want to show you as an example of what's on London buses. Does it come up? It's on, I can't see it, so what does it say? Right. So the atheist movement will do things like this at the moment. I mean, their books, they've got books now which are targeting children as well, right? So, for example, Dawkins has a book which is talking about outgrowing God. And it's specifically targeted at children. And he talks about his own experience at 14, 15, and how he, quote unquote, outgrew God. And these are being bought and sold and passed around for people to be able to read. So we understand, firstly, there's a general atheist movement. Second slide, if you don't mind, Said. What does it say? I can't hear it.
Godless, fearless, ex-Muslim.
Godless, fearless, ex-Muslim. The ex-Muslim identity that is taking place.
Nearly 1 in 4 Muslims raised in the US have left Islam.
Yeah. You know, we often talk about Islam is the fastest growing religion. It is. But there's also certain evidence to say in certain places we are hemorrhaging Muslim numbers. People are leaving. Now, the ex-Muslim movement is claiming 1 out of every 4 who have grown up in the United States of America are leaving. I don't know whether that's true or not. We can argue that at another point. The statistic itself isn't important. But actually what's happening here is important to understand. That there is a target upon the Muslim community specifically to get them out of Islam. Next slide. What does it say?
Apostasy is not a crime.
Apostasy is not a crime. Because the trope is that apostates should be killed. And therefore, where is your freedom of religion? Remember we stated yesterday, when you have all of these enlightenment different values, they will place freedom at the centrality of it. Meaning freedom of what? Freedom from everything, including God. That's what they want. So now, in order to be able to demonize the Muslim community, there's this trope of saying apostasy in this way. Now, there's a particular movement that I want to mention to my sisters as well. Everyone should know about it, but I want my sisters to know about the types of tropes that are being used in order to get to the Muslims for them to be able to take themselves out of Islam. Have you all heard of someone called Majid Nawaz? Yeah? I apologize, I'm sorry. As you know, Majid Nawaz, creator of the Quilliam Foundation, taker of Prevent money, got sponsored to the tune of several million. You know who sponsored Quilliam Foundation? You know those Republican, in the United States of America, there's Republican candidates, isn't there? The person who was closest, who was the person that was the second nominee after Donald Trump? The person who was closest to winning the nominee for the Republican Party last term. Does anyone remember? So who said it? Ted Cruz, well done. Ted Cruz, what do you know about him? Okay, you know he's very anti-Islam. Very, very. You know his organization, the same people that sponsored Ted Cruz's run for the president, also sponsor Majid Nawaz. That gives you an idea of where this man is getting his money from. Now, it's not for me to say he's an apostate or he's left the religion, whatever. But you know Majid Nawaz, he works with someone called Maryam Namazi. Have you heard of Maryam Namazi? She's less famous, but she's one of the heads of this ex-Muslim movement. Iranian lady, very passionate about her ex-Muslim identity, and is, taking the reins on this. You know what they started? You know what they started recently? Only a couple of years ago. They started Take Off Your Hijab Day. Every year, they celebrate Take Off Your Hijab Day. You know why? They say, you believe you're doing this for yourself. You're wearing the hijab for yourself and not for men. You're not doing it because it's patriarchal, your religion. Yeah? Prove it. Take off your hijab for a day. You understand the argument? Yeah? If you're doing this for yourself, prove it that you're not doing it for men. So take off your hijab for one day and go free. Go free. Do you know how many tens of thousands of Muslim women every day actually take off their hijab to prove that they're doing it for themselves? Can you see the inverted logic here? If I need to prove that I'm doing it for myself, then I don't need to prove I'm doing it for you, Majid. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah? He's right, the starting route has to be there, yeah? You have to do it for yourself. It's very right. Ahsan, thank you. Yeah? This is the challenge. And so many, and actually, I'm going into different tangents, but it was my understanding the first Muslimah to take off her hijab as a proof to say, look at me, I'm doing this for myself, was a woman by the name of Huda Sha'rawi, an Egyptian woman, I believe. So we actually have these movements. Now, because we have these movements, we have to understand what's happening in front of our eyes and the way in which we need to protect our children from that. And a number of things need to be done. The first thing that needs to be done is to be able to realize the challenge that's in front of us and to be able to ensure that we teach Islam as it is properly and to be able to help our children from a young age have a deep, positive relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The whole movement is an ex-Muslim movement to get people to become atheists. So what we need to do is to have a very strong aqa'id within our madrasa system, which grounds them in being able to prove God for themselves and grounds them in having a personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and helps them to understand that when they grow up, they will get trials, and trials are a natural part of your life. And therefore, when you go through these trials, how you understand these different trials in your life. That means we need to review the different syllabuses that we have in our madrasas, whether they are sufficient to respond to the challenges that we have at the moment. When you have an entire movement that is dedicated to disproving the existence of God, you need to respond with a movement to ensure you can prove and establish the faith in God. Do you remember that story we told you yesterday about Shaykh Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr? Yes? Do you remember? We stated as the example, His Eminence, Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, saw the problem in the society was communism. People were moving towards atheism. He found the one scholar that was capable of responding and said, you lead us in this direction of response. We need the same. We need to be very strong in understanding our aqa'id and to help people to understand. Now, just to help us think about some of these things as parents, because I want to give something specific, so parents can think about how they bring up their children in light of God. You know, this is from a non-Muslim, by the way, and there's a non-Muslim author who actually tries very hard to be able to prove God from the fitra perspective. And he mentions a couple of examples. For example, he says very beautifully, he says, you know, your children, they will naturally, there is an innate thing within them that they will understand that there is a creator. How you unpack that and begin to put a name to him, be it God or Allah or whatever, you will do it. But innate in all of us is the ability to recognize that there is a creator. And he unpacks this as an example. He says, when you leave for work, mum or dad leave for work, let's say they have a car, right? It might be that mum has her own car, dad has her own car, for example. So now when the car comes back home, normally you'd expect that the young child is excited to see their mum or dad after work. So you'll notice that you can ask certain very perceptive questions. For example, you will say, whose car is that? And the young child will say, that's mummy's car. That's daddy's car. Right? There's a degree of ownership. They understand that there's a relationship between daddy driving that car and it belonging to him. Right? Even if they don't understand the complexities of ownership, at a very basic level, they will put two and two together. Then he says, child psychologist, he says, point towards the sun. Whose is that? Who does that belong to? They won't be able to say it belongs to God. They won't be able to say it belongs to daddy or to mummy. Because there's no way to be able to connect those two things. There's no way to say that it actually is belonging to mummy or daddy. Mummy and daddy haven't actually got it in their hands. They don't control it. They don't do anything. But immediately when you ask them that, they will have to be able to say that thing is a creation, therefore it has to be belonging to someone else, the same way the car belongs to dad.
The car belongs to mom. And from a young age, if you help them to be able to put that together, you will see the way in which they will immediately say that thing has to belong to someone else. It has to come from someone else. The fact that the car came from a shop, the car came from someone else and now belongs to daddy, where did that come from? And you will instill in them the idea that that needed to have a creator. And within them, they will start to understand God, creator, and creation. Another example, this comes from one of the great Sunni scholars, Fakhruddin al-Razi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. Sheikh Razi actually mentions a different argument about helping children. He says, try this. He says, experiment on your children. And many ulama, they do this to help bring up their children in this way. He says, experiment on your children. He says, for example, hide and throw a pebble, throw a stone in front of them, right? So don't hit them, yeah? I know some of the children can be very naughty, but they're not the shayateen. This isn't Hajj, yeah? 7 stones, yeah? He said, throw a stone in front of them, and you'll notice when it bounces, not only will they look at it, they will also try to figure out where it came from. He said, that's instinctive. That's your fitrah. They won't believe that stone just came from nothing. Understand? The same way they won't believe that that sun comes from nothing. It's not possible. The way they understand that the car has to have some belonging, has to have some ownership, has to have comes from somewhere. It belongs to daddy. I'm associating it to daddy. I can't associate the sun to daddy. Who am I going to associate the sun to? When you throw the pebble in front of them, they will immediately look at the pebble, but also trying to work out where did it come from. You will help bring out of them and talk to them through it. Help them to understand that couldn't have come from nowhere. If the stone, the little pebble didn't come from anywhere, you're telling me this entire universe didn't come from somewhere? Help them to be able to understand these things. Instill in them good tawheed at the level, on the age in which they need to be. As they grow up and they start encountering Dawkins, as they start encountering Darwinism, you need to have strong answers to that. And the madrasa system needs to have it, parents need to have it, and the pulpit needs to have it, lest we actually go through these attacks. Number one. Number two, we also need to be able to help our children to have a genuine relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, again, I'm just telling you my experience as a madrasa teacher, and those of you who are madrasa teachers can tell me whether you've experienced something different or the same. I remember madrasa children, they say to me things like, we want to wake up for Salatul Fajr, but our parents don't even wake up. They're young kids, they're going to struggle. They actually say it to us, our parents don't even wake up for Salatul Fajr. They won't help us. Sisters, genuinely, sisters come to us and they say, we want to wear hijab and loose clothing. Our parents buy for us tights. Our parents buy for us tight jeans. She doesn't have money herself. Of course she has to wear whatever her parents buy for her. Imagine, you actually have children that want to become as moral as possible, to be reflections of the religion as possible, take their deen seriously, and parents are actually the ones to destroy that from them. And then by the time they become 15 and they, leave and don't take religion seriously, then the parents come to Maulana. Oh, please save our children. Is there any evil eye on them? Please give us a ta'weez. Really? Really? How many times did you wake them up for Fajr? How many times did you help them? None. Yeah, go get a ta'weez. Honestly. We have to realize these are some of the challenges that we have. And the realities of what's happening on the ground to be able to assist our children and not become the burden, the extra burden upon them from the challenges that they are already facing in a society which is trying to grab them and take them out of their religion. Now, I want to conclude with 1 or 2 verses, inshallah, which are very important for us to just think through some of these challenges that are there. Now, before I come to these verses, I just want to read one very interesting hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. This hadith is so beautiful, and I preface the discussion on the ayat with this hadith because it shows you how subjected the heart can become through all of these challenges that it's facing. The atheist movement, how subjected it can become to the Islamophobic movement that are trying to rip your children away from faith altogether. Just think about this hadith and imagine your own heart, and then imagine the heart of a 12-year-old from our own society. Imam alayhi salam says the following: indeed, there is a piece of flesh that has been placed inside this human being, which is the most amazing thing in him, and that is his heart. It has sources of wisdom, but also things that are contrary to it. When hope enters into it, covetousness can also enter into it. Right? When you hope for something, I want the new job, I want the new car, I want the new. At the same time, covetousness, envy, low desire for that thing can also enter into that heart. And when covetousness increases, then greed overcomes the heart and destroys it. So you can easily be attacked in this way. You start off innocent, I want, I hope. Greed can enter and destroy the heart. Despair can also enter into the heart. And if despair begins to take control, then grief kills the heart. Anger can enter into the heart. And if anger overcomes the heart too much, the heart becomes rageful and intensified in its rage. The heart can be blessed with pleasure. And sometimes when it's blessed with pleasure, it forgets precautions. If it becomes overcome by fear, it becomes preoccupied with caution. When peace prevails in it, the heart can easily become neglectful as well. When hardship befalls it, impatience can disgrace the heart. If it gains wealth, affluence can overtake it and make it oppressive. If it faces indigence, then distress can overtake the heart. If hunger attacks it, weakness disables the heart. If eating increases, the heaviness of the stomach pains the heart. Thus every curtailment is harmful to it, and every excess injures the heart. We're so susceptible. We're so susceptible to anything, even goodness that comes in. It can end up being a source of problem for us. We have to be able to understand with all of these challenges that face our children, they are being attacked all the time by so many different movements. Now, many a time, people do end up leaving. And when people end up leaving, especially with the atheistic movement, it is well worth thinking about whether this actually brings any harm to the Muslim community. Why do I conclude with this? Because for those who end up becoming champions of that movement, they think that they've done harm to Islam when one person leaves or two people leaves or something like that. I want to show you how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about those people who leave the faith and whether it's of damage to Islam in Britain. Even if we lose 100 people, is it of damage to Islam itself, and whether we need to think about it in those terms. So the first verse I wish to be able to mention to you is from chapter number 5, verse number 54. Is that correct, Sayyid, there? Verse number 54. Does it come up on the screen, the Arabic? Could you read it? Yeah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Man yartadda minkum an dinihi فسوف يأتي الله بقوم يحبهم ويحبونه أذلة على المؤمنين أعزة على الكافرين يجاهدون في سبيل الله ولا يخافون لومة لائم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله واسع عليم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe. So he's addressing the faithful. Subhanallah. How lucky we are that God would actually address us. Imagine being addressed by God himself. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Man yartadda minkum an dinihi. Whoever becomes murtad, whoever apostates from his religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion, should you be worried? Should you think that Islam is now going to become weak? Should you think that the deen is all of a sudden going to be destroyed by secularism, by liberalism? فَسَوْفَ يَأْتِي اللَّهُ بِقَوْمٍ يُحِبُّهُمْ وَيُحِبُّونَهُ. Surely Allah is going to bring about a community. He loves them and they love Him. Even if you lose one person, Allah says He's going to bring about a qawm. Subhanallah. Let them take. Of course not let them take. But don't feel like our religion is going to vanish. Don't feel like, Islam is on the back foot here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised you your strength in this country. Even if the ex-Muslim identity, the ex this identity, the ex that identity wants to be able to pick off people, Allah will strengthen you with a community. Indeed, they are going to love Allah and Allah is going to love them. Next verse, inshaAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions again very similarly in chapter number 47, Surah Muhammad, the verse number 38. Last part of the verse. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُوا أَمْثَالَكُمْ. And if you were to turn away and to change to a different community, Allah will bring about that change. He will change your community to another community and they will not be like you. If you want to leave, it doesn't harm Allah. It doesn't harm Islam. The only harm is to you and I if we fail in our responsibilities. If we leave the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't impact Islam whatsoever. So my humble warning to you is that these movements are only going to increase and you should be aware of them. And that the next decade of the year 2020 to 2030, not only do we want to ensure that we take God to other people, we also need to ensure that our own community is very strong in God. We need to be able to help them understand Quran deeply, to genuinely connect with Quran. We need to be able to help them to genuinely connect with ad'iyah and the dua, the supplications that are given to us. One of the ulama was saying, he said, look at these ad'iyah from Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam. Can't you connect with God? Can't you talk to God? Yes, of course you can talk to God. But when I talk to God, it's so simplistic. Oh Allah, I need X. Oh Allah, give me Y. Oh Allah, my problem is this. It's so simplistic. Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam are showing us the language of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way in which there is no other type of supplication that could match it. Help our youth to connect with the God in these different ways, and inshallah we will protect all of our youth from the challenges that are going to be attacking us. Homework. We have talked about God 2 nights. The importance of ensuring our society is God-centric and the insurance of our own community remaining God-centric under these multiple attacks that are in front of you. After that, where do we go next? So in the maqasid, in the different conversations, where should we now focus our discussion? And so the homework would be for you and I to reflect on how we can then think next about the challenges and where this series should be going. Again, tomorrow, I hope to ask you, where do you think we should go next in our priorities? And then we can see how people think of this series going forward, inshallah. Look at the companions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and the great heights that they had reached. You know, if you look at the companions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, it is so interesting how a ma'soom imam who has such a connection with Allah Jalla Jalaluhu also takes so much solace and enjoyment from a righteous companion. Our fifth Imam alayhi salam has a hadith which he mentions. He says, nothing gives me more joy than to be in the companionship of those who are God conscious. Can you imagine? An imam says his joy comes from being around those who are God conscious. If we want to attract the presence of the imam of our time, we also want to rise to that level of God consciousness ourselves. You can imagine the way in which these companions speak to their imam. You'll remember when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is walking with his companions, he mentions to them, he says, what sprinkles in you overflows in me. Look at the way in which he understands how much is inside these companions, but also wants to help them become even more. And shows how much more is the potential for God to be in the human being. This is why, on the night of Ashura, His Eminence, the Master of the Martyrs, says, I know not of companions like you. Rasulullah has great companions. Ali ibn Abi Talib had great companions. Imagine now when the Master of the Martyrs lauds you and praises you and says, I know not. I was amongst the companions of my grandfather and my father, but I know not of companions like you. You are truly the manifestation. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. Best of communities heralded for mankind. On the night of Ashura, it was these great companions that would pledge their allegiance again towards Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and even pledge their allegiance to the ladies to grant them the comfort in their hearts that they would not leave Imam the next day. We are told that the Imam sat in that tent and he would tell them, leave, they are after my head, not your head. Leave, I give you permission to leave. We are told that the Imam actually puts out that candle such that the entire tent becomes dark, allowing them, saying that if you feel embarrassed to leave me whilst the candle is still lit, you do not dare look at me in the face. I even allow you to leave. I will even put out the candle so you leave. When the candle is relit, not a single one of those companions had moved from their place. Again, they would give their allegiance to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. These are the types of people that we want to raise in our communities. The most beloved of companions to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was Habib ibn Madahir. 63 years old. His age was similar to that of Imam, which means that he had grown up with the Imam. The Imam had been a childhood friend of his. When Muslim ibn Aqil, the ambassador of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, came to the city of Kufa, they ran to pledge the allegiance, including Hani ibn Urwa, Muslim ibn Awsaja, and Habib ibn Madahir. They would host Muslim in their houses.
They would allow him to move from house to house so that he could move with his mission as well. But they were also, many of them, placed under arrest. Habib ibn Madahir avoided the arrest by virtue of being hidden by his tribe. We are told that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam writes a letter to Habib, which was snuck into the city of Kufa. Habib reads this letter and he sees that his Imam is calling him, asking him to come to his aid. We are told by our Dhakirin that it was the day in which he was due to dye his beard. He says, I will dye my beard with my blood to be saving the grandson of Rasulullah. It is said that he tells his wife that he is to depart, and that he takes for his son and his slave to go and find a means for him to leave the city of Kufa. As he leaves the city of Kufa, the narrations mention that he tries to hide at night, he tries to hide during the day, and he tries to move at night under the cover of darkness, and eventually gets outside the gates of the walls of Kufa. As he reaches his horse and his servant, he says to his servant, I free you. I free you, you may leave. The servant responds to him and says, O Habib ibn Madahir, I have been serving you my entire life, and by virtue of serving you I have served Hussein ibn Ali my entire life. Do you now free me at this moment? No, you will take me with you to Karbala. We are told in the Maqtal that as Habib arrived towards Karbala, Imam al-Hussein tells Abbas, go outside and welcome. He is coming. Who is coming? It is my dear friend. Abbas comes, and as Habib comes towards the camp, there is a furor, there is this movement, this hubbub inside the tents, there is an excitement outside the tents. We are told that at this moment, Lady Zainab wants to know what is happening. She calls towards Fizza and says, Fizza, tell me what is happening outside. Fizza goes outside and sees that Habib ibn Madahir has arrived. She goes and tells the princess, Lady Zainab alayha salam, Habib has arrived. She is narrated to have responded, send my salutations to Habib. Imagine when Zainab gives you salutations because you come to the aid of the religion of Allah, because you come to the aid of the
Imam of the time. Can you imagine what it is like to receive the salams of Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam? We are told that Habib responds by weeping, who is Habib to receive the salam of Sayyidah Zainab? As the afternoon comes, each time Habib ibn Madahir comes towards Hussein and says, Oh my Imam, companions are going to fight and die. How is it that I am still here? Why is it that I have not yet gone towards the battlefield? How does the Imam respond? Habib, you are my beloved since childhood. We have spent so much time together. How do I see you go towards the battlefield and leave me alone? We are told it comes towards the time of Salat al-Dhuhr. At this moment, one of the companions by the name of Abu Thamama turns towards the Imam and says, Oh Aba Abdullah, the time of Dhuhr has set in. Should we not pray? Imam says, May Allah reward you and raise you amongst those who have protected the Salah, amongst those who have ensured that the Salah is kept. At this moment, they call out to the army of Yazid, we wish to be able to pray our salah. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wishes to pray his salah. We are told at this moment, evil man by the name of Hussein ibn Numair, he calls out, your prayer will never be accepted. In a fit of rage, Habib ibn Madahir responds and says, do you think that the prayer of the grandson of Rasulullah will not be accepted whilst yours is accepted? He enters into the battlefield and he strikes him on his face. The man falls towards the floor and they drag him away before Habib is able to kill him. At that moment, we are told that the companions begin to line up for their prayers. And there are certain companions who stand in front of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, allowing him to pray. We are told that the enemies, because they do not believe in their prayers, they begin to shower arrows towards Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam whilst he is praying his salah. There is a story, a dream that is mentioned by the ulama. One of the ulama mentions, he says, I was reciting the ziyarah of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, and I came upon that line that says, had I only been with you, then I could have been successful like your companions were successful on that day. And in my heart, I said to myself, indeed, I could easily have been there on the 10th of Muharram. I could easily have been amongst the companions of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, like the companions were. That night, I fell asleep, and in my dream, I found myself on the afternoon of the 10th of Muharram. I was in that saf, I was in that line in front of Imam al-Hussein as he was praying his salah, and they began to shower arrows towards my Imam. As the arrow came towards me and my Imam was standing behind me, in my dream I turned away so that the arrow didn't hit me. As I turned in my dream, I saw that the arrow had hit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I woke up realizing that I was not special enough to be amongst that level of companions, because I was being told that had I been there, I would have turned away from the arrow and it would have hit my master Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The companions who were praying with Imam, the arrows are showered upon them, and we are told by al-Dhakirin that they did not fall to the ground unless and until Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had finished his salah. At this point, we are told that these great companions of Muslim ibn Awsaja and Habib ibn Madahir, they turn towards Aba Abdullah. They say, "Oh Aba Abdullah, we wish to be able to pray our salah in the heavens behind Rasulullah. Do you allow us to be able to do so?" Imam says, "Go. I give you permission to go and enter into the battlefield." Muslim ibn Awsaja enters to the battlefield. He is struck down. As he is struck down, Imam and Habib come running towards him. Habib sits down beside Muslim. He says, "Oh Muslim, had I not been expecting of joining you in a few minutes time, I would ask your will. Tell me what it is that I need to do for you." In with the last gasps of his breath, Muslim ibn Awsaja points towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He says, "Oh Habib, my will to you is look after Hussein ibn Ali with everything that you have." Habib says, "Indeed, I will do so." Habib enters into the battlefield. The narration says that he kills more than 60 of the enemies. But as he is fighting on his horse, someone comes from the side. Someone comes and strikes him on his head with their sword. At that moment, another comes and thrusts a spear into him. He falls towards the ground. As he is lying on the ground, someone comes and strikes off the head of Habib ibn Madahir. At this moment, Hussein ibn Ali cries out, "Oh Habib, how is it that I could be after you?" He comes towards the broken body of Habib ibn Madahir. He sits down beside him. He says, "Indeed, oh Habib, you are one of those who used to recite the Quran entirely in the night." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we're to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those people in a state of war, oppression, poverty, homelessness, disease and disaster. Ya Allah, grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. And grant us to be amongst those like the companions of Karbala, Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein.